please take a moment to read this river land acknowledgement. I did not write it. It is kind of lengthy, but please take a moment to read it, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, hopefully everybody has had an opportunity to read that now. I think it has allowed me to diagnose my audio problems. And I wanted to thank you for attending this performance that we're calling Decolonizing the Mind through Gaian song. And I'm going to start off with a song, the Homeric hymn to Gaia. To Gaia, mother of all I sing, primeval, oldest being, you comprise everything on earth, the land, and those that take root, and those that move upon the land, the sky, and those who fly through the air, the sea, and all who swim through your waters. All of these are nourished from your bliss. Through you, O Queen, humans are blessed both with children and with harvests. You have the power to give life to humans and also to take life away. Blessed are those whom you delight to honor, for they possess everything in abundance, and enough is abundance to the wise. Such is it for those you honor. Revered goddess, unrivaled deity, rejoice, O mother of the gods, wife of twinkling Uranos, for this song. Grant me a cheerful heart. And I just remembered a very important audio setting that I needed to configure, so that will be helpful in a moment when we have guitar accompaniment. But I wanted to start off with that song, the Homeric hymn to Gaia. It is the first Gaian song that was performed by my band, Half Pagan, but it is not, strictly speaking, original. The text comes from the Homeric hymn to Gaia, which comes from around 7th to 4th century before the Christian era. It's not actually believed to be composed by Homer, by the way, despite the title. They just call it the Homeric hymn. And that was a new translation by the late Dr. Michael Homan, modified by me to reflect a contemporary understanding of Gaia. And that brings us to Dr. Michael Homan, who, as I said, he translated that hymn in 2018. He was my co-worker, my neighbor, my friend, and my collaborator. And really, we shared a common deep cultural background, a common cultural heritage, you might say. Our lineage traces back to Europe, not to the region we currently inhabit. So we fall under the category often labeled as white people, a term that carries, its own set of complexities. I hypothesized that our forebears were once indigenous to a land, because all humans have indigenous roots. But, history is marked by shifts and transformations, and that leads me to wonder what happened. When did we become not indigenous? It's surely about more than mere migration patterns. And while I recognize there's no single universal that defines indigeneity, I suspect that my distant ancestors felt a profound connection to the earth, an understanding of the interdependence of humanity in the natural world. And losing that view seems to be a part of becoming non-indigenous. I further assert that Europeans were colonized by the Roman Empire. Eventually, the European mind was colonized by Christianity, which intertwined with capitalism promoted a worldview of separation. So imperial Christian capitalist Europeans then colonized the world. And so it was that our ancestors came from Europe to North America. And note that our ancestors, Dr. Hohmann's ancestors and mine, migrated in the 19th century, not in those earlier waves of immigration. And that obscured some realities for me. I thought of the colonists, as those Europeans who came earlier, the Pilgrims and the American Revolutionary War and all of that. I didn't think of our ancestors as colonists because the colonial era was supposedly over before they arrived. But nevertheless, our ancestors participated in settler colonialism, mine in Indiana and Dr. Hohmann's in Nebraska. They were comforted by their material gains as well as their religion, even as they became complicit in the destruction and displacement of the nations already here. In other words, genocide. And ecocide. This photo depicts a remnant of old-growth forest in Allen County, Indiana. And this photo is what really drove it home to me. According to a brief biography of Conrad Trier, who was my first immigrant ancestor, he arrived in 1834. According to this brief bio, the country abounded with Indians and with packs of ferocious wolves. The woods were cleared for farmland. My great-great-great-grandfather Conrad Trier cleared woods much like these to make his farm. Well, I started to wake up to this reality as a young man in the 1980s, as I attempted to throw off the mental shackles of my conservative Christian indoctrination, the beginning of a process of decolonizing my mind. And I think Dr. Hohmann had a similar experience. That was a necessary step. But what to do, the rest of my life? How to make sense of it all? How to go on? How, in other words, to live? From those days until now, I've used song as an interpretive framework within which to express my resistance to the established order and to celebrate newfound insights. As a teenager, I composed punk rock lyrics, which I mumbled under my breath, and I eventually worked my way up to staged performances with actual musicians who knew how to play instruments. Dr. Hohmann was also in punk bands, and he recorded more and toured further than I did. But of course, that was not a career, not for me and not for Dr. Hohmann. We both pursued further studies. We both ended up working in the ed biz, both at Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans around the turn of the century. This is the first known photo that depicts the two of us together. We're at a jazz funeral for democracy after George Bush's election. Re-election. So then I think actually our point of divergence may have been when the city of New Orleans was flooded in 2005. You might know it as Katrina. We were both in our 40s. That's a picture that Dr. Hohmann took of me with all of my stuff that I'd pulled out from the bottom floor of our house. It's in the background. This was quickly followed by the birth of my daughter and a kind of a reawakening for me and a quest to discover my true spiritual identity. But as for Dr. Homan, he rode out the storm, and he never seemed quite the same after that. But I'd like to share with you a song that he wrote now. This is a song called Bear Awakening, and joining me on guitar here is George Cawley. Early spring, the snow begins to melt. Gentle breezes whisper on her pelt. The bear is lying in a topple inside her den. She dreams of salmon full of roe, acorns falling to the ground below. The bear, once sleeping, is awakened. She shakes her head, she yawns hard. She hears her twin cubs crying from hunger. She stretches her limbs and exhales deeply. She is standing, the bear awakens. The bear is lumbering outside of her den. Bright sunlight on ice reflections. The bear, she's squinting, but gaining focus. She licks the snow, it tastes good. She gains the strength to nurse her hungry cubs. The bear gazes off into the distance. She shakes her body, she scratches her back. She rolls on the ground, she looks for snacks. She stretches her neck and inhales deeply. She is walking, the bear awakens. It's going to be a pretty good year for the bears. So that's a song that Dr. Homan wrote for our band, Half Pagan. Yes, a decade passed after the flooding of New Orleans, and we formed a band. Started as a duo, just the two of us. Started as a duo, and we took the name Half Pagan from what riffed on our divergent status. Dr. Homan was a theologian and a Bible scholar, and of course I was the pagan half of the band. And in the natural course of my seeking, I'd been drawn into the milieu of contemporary paganism. And as an aside, I might mention that I considered myself a devotee of Gaia, but I couldn't find dedicated Gaians, only eclectic pagans. So we wrote songs about New Orleans, we wrote songs about ancient Babylon, songs that decried our extractive economy and uplifted ecological wisdom, and even songs that attempted to articulate a Gaian perspective. Well, eventually, we expanded into a full band. In this photo, you can see Dr. Homan has the big beard in the background there. You'll also see Mike Hogan on bass and Calypso Homan, that's Dr. Homan's daughter, on the cello. And you might be able to make out Enkidu, the dog, there in a crawfish costume. Well, we recorded an album. The song I just performed for you was a song from our third album, our final album actually, released on May Day of 2022. A concept album, if you will. A series of seasonal observances known as the Wheel of the Year in neo-paganism. It's a commonly held cycle of sacred celebrations. Sometimes they're called Sabbats. I'd even written a book on this topic. So we wrote songs for each Sabbath. And that was the idea of the album. And that brings us to the seasonal moment of the Winter Cross, also known as Candlemas, also known as Imbolc, also known as Groundhog Day, also known as the Feast of the Presentation of Jesus Christ, or the Feast of the Purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or the Feast of the Holy Encounter, or the Meeting of the Lord, or Hypopante, or La Chandelière, or Fête de la Lumière, or Fiesta de la Candelaria, or the Feast Day of St. Bridget, or Briid's Day, or Brigantia, or some Gaelic and Welsh names that I can't even pronounce. It goes by many names, this Feast of Flames. It's halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. It's the time when bears awaken from hibernation. So yes, Dr. Homan wrote Bear Awakening, depicting a bear waking from hibernation. And what I love about this song is it conveys a sense of biophilia, which means love of life, and particularly other forms of life beyond the human. Well, I didn't think of these songs as components of ritual, but that suggested itself quite naturally. I mean, as with any band, there was always a ritualistic element to our performances, which started off in neighborhood bars. I was already convening gatherings for ritual celebrations of each Sabbath. So it was a simple thing to invite our band leader, Dr. Michael Homan, a professor of theology, to bring his guitar to a bonfire we built on the banks of Bayou St. John. But that happened only once or twice before Dr. Homan died in September of 2022. It all happened very suddenly. But the wheel keeps on turning. That's the nature of the Wheel of the Year. After it kind of messes up the flow of my narrative, but can we sneak in a chant for the spring equinox, George? Think we could do that? Yes? Okay, great. Just real quickly, to preserve the seasonal sequence, after the winter cross comes the spring equinox. So this is a chant that I wrote, and we're just going to do it real quickly for you. And it's kind of got a weird beat. It's in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Step into the light. 3, 4, 5. Step into the light.
Step into the light.
Taking shape, taking form, taking power.
Step into the light.
Sprouting up, budding forth, soon to flower.
Step into the light.
In the spring, in the time of the equinox.
Step into the light.
Finding balance, finding strength in every paradox.
Step into the light.
In good health, in good heart, in good spirit.
Step into the light.
Song of earth, song of life, can you hear it?
Step into the light.
Step into the light. Step into the light. All right. Anyway, moving on. That is George Cawley, I'm saying your name right, aren't you?
Yes.
George Cawley on background vocals and earlier on guitar. He'll be on guitar and again with us in a moment. What was surprising to me is that after Dr. Homan died, another guitar player volunteered, my neighbor from down the street. And so I've continued to sing the songs in a ritual context. Which brings us to the next seasonal moment, the spring cross. After the spring equinox, you have the spring cross. It's midway between spring equinox and the summer solstice. It's also known as May Day or Beltane. And there's probably a whole bunch of other names for this too. So I'd like to perform for you now a song called Signs. This song was also featured on on that final album. But it originally came to me on May Day 2014. It depicts a revelation of Gaia that touches on the numerous interlocking crises of our particular historical moment. There were signs, but I didn't heed them. There were signs all along the way. There were signs of her arrival on the 1st of May. When spring was melting into summer, and the nights they were turning warm, that's when I caught her message in the termite swarm. She was there in the golden sunset. She was there in the live oak tree. She was there like the air we breathe, but we never see. And as we behold her shining face, radiating into outer space, so we remember we come from a holy place. This is the context of the human race. She was there when you were born, and when you crawled from your mama's womb. She'll be there at the bitter end when you meet your doom. And she's there in every instant, every moment that comes between. She's there in your every nightmare, your every dream. She's there in the clap of thunder. She's there in the raging sea. She's there in the grizzly bear and the honeybee. And through our emergency, we got a sense of urgency. Oh, what do we make of the gifts we're given? And once we see her, our perspective becomes clearer. We've got to change our way of living. There are signs, if only we'd heed them. So many signs all along the way. There are signs of her imminent presence in the world today. If only we'd pay attention, if only we had eyes to see, if only we could feel the connection between you and me. She's there, she's the golden sunset. She's there, she's the live oak tree. She's there, she's the air we breathe, but we never see. And if we listen, we might just hear her call, rising up from underneath it all. She's calling us to revolution. She's She's calling to our hearts and minds. She's calling us to live in accord with her grand design, forged in her ancient crucible of time. But tell me, is it too late to heed the signs? So yes, I've been saying, ritual context. We've been having regular meetings in City Park since 2020, very near the site of our band's publicity photo that I showed you earlier. And the purpose of these meetings, the Crescent City Gaian Guild, is threefold. We meet to support each other in our journey as Gaians. We meet to deepen our understanding of who we are and what we're doing here, as well as just caring for one another in a most basic way. We meet to celebrate life, to revel in the beauty and glory of Gaia, and to mark the passing of seasons. And finally, we meet to heal Mother Earth in the sense that all of us are engaged in various sorts of ecological activism. And it's hoped that our guild meetings will buoy us up and give us strength in these efforts. And further, we know that by healing ourselves, we're also healing Gaia. The Gaian Way, the local guild rather, is a part of a global network called the Gaian Way. It's a new religious movement founded by Eric Asadorian in 2019, organized around the idea that we are utterly dependent on, but not separate from, Gaia. In the natural, so I should say, have I explained, I should ask, have I explained actually the Gaia, the living earth, called Gaia by both ancient Greeks and modern scientists, known by many other names in cultures around the world. I've dedicated the remainder of my life to a devotional religious practice with Gaia at the center. In a ritual context, if I can bring it back down to earth, to the embodied ritual context of our guild meetings, we often do breath-based meditations on the wheel of the year to see what we can learn from the seasonal moment and kind of mapping that onto the cycle of the breath. And I've been surprised to learn how the songs function in the ritual flow. So before a guided meditation, these songs, which we usually do as a sing-along, everybody singing together, they can raise the energy level, funneling into the meditation itself. And following a guided meditation, they encapsulate, kind of in a poetic fashion, the insights of that meditation. They give joyful expression to the mysteries of contemplative practice. And I wish that in this online meeting, we had time for one of these guided meditations, but they take a little longer. And I wish that in this online meeting we had the ability to do a sing-along, but synchronizing musical performances over Zoom is probably not a great idea. And I should mention also, I called this decolonizing the mind. Well, that's a phrase, as I learned after I'd already submitted the proposal to do this performance. It's a phrase already in currency, well used. In fact, that was an unintentional reference on my part, kind of reflecting my own ignorance of the literature and the many times that this title has been deployed. But I wanted to speak about what I meant more specifically by saying decolonizing the mind. It seems apparent, it seems even obvious, that in order to live as a Gaian, one must cast off and unlearn the harmful supremacist ideologies that regard the earth as dead and other living species as dumb. In other words, one must decolonize the mind. And though it's surely not sufficient in itself, this would seem to be a necessary step on the path towards decolonizing our society. And that, in turn, is a necessary step to heal Gaia. So these songs, of course, are only one small part of a decolonization process, a process which is always ongoing and always in need of refreshment. As the songs are shared and as they aim to shift the heart, they may lead to bigger things. They may provide a basis for action. We hope that they may play a role in catalyzing the revolutions that we need. So I'm even writing new songs to fill in certain gaps, songs that Dr. Homan never got to hear. That earlier chant was one example. So here's another for the summer solstice to kind of wrap things up. In a ritual context, this would follow after a guided meditation, which might help interpret the imagery. If it seems oblique, well, I'm sure this audience can appreciate that too. Flowers to Flame. Flowers in the springtime are nourished by the soil and the rain, and the power of the sun, which will surely consume us again. The forces that pull us together also pull us apart. The height of the light hides the sacred heart of the dark. Flowers to flame in the giveaway time. Summer untamed, enough to find all we need to know her name, to plant the black seed, flowers to flame. Summertime is sweeter because the fruit ripens with the days. Enzymatic magic fired up by holy solar rays. Starhawk calls it the giveaway time of the sun. It's the dance of the world going round since the world begun. Flowers to flame in the giveaway time. Summer untamed, enough to find all we need to know her name, to plant the black seed, flowers to flame. A day given over to life, given over to love. From the earth underneath our feet, for the sunshine above. With the petals thrown into the fire, we are one and the same. We can be given over like flowers to flame. Flowers to flame in the giveaway time. Summer untamed, enough to find all we need to know her name, to plant the black seed, flowers to flame, flowers to flame, flowers to flame. Ah, you didn't think I could hit that last note, did you? All right, I did want to thank you very much for coming and listening to this rehearsal, this run through, this practice, this preview session. We're going to do it again on Friday at the Harvard conference on the program for the evolution of spirituality. If you want more information on me, you can visit barteverson.com. If you want information about the band I've been telling you about, Dr. Homan's, the band that Dr. Homan formed with me, halfpagan.com. If you want to know more about the Gaian way, of course, Gaianism.org. And finally, I do hope that we'll have a little time for dialogue, for conversation. If there's anything that you wanted to share or ask, I'm all ears.